Welcome back to Beyond the Shears, the podcast where pet grooming professionals and small business owners come to sharpen their business know how. Today, we're diving into the world of banking, not loans or financing per se, but the everyday money management strategies that can help keep your business running smoothly, safely, and efficiently. Joining me today is guest Laura Burnett Shoemaker, Vice President of Cash Management at Community State Bank right here in good old Wisconsin. She works directly with small business owners to improve how they handle their cash, protect their assets, and make smart decisions when it comes to banking operations. Whether you're a solo groomer or managing a growing team, this episode will give you insight into what a good banking relationship looks and feels like. And that's why it's so much more than just having a checking account. So, Laura, thank you so much for coming on. But first, I would like to ask a question. What does the Vice President of Cash Management do exactly?
Well, thank you, Crystal. I'm very happy to be here. I appreciate the invitation to join you. So cash management, or as some banks call it, treasury management, focuses on helping business customers with all of their cash flow needs. So we enhance collection of accounts receivables, help improve operational flexibility. We assist with payment services, so such as merchant services, accepting credit cards, using ACH or electronic payments to send funds. We help with risk mitigation. Fraud is a big issue in today's world, and helping protect your account appropriately actually takes up quite a bit of my time during the day. And then, of course, some strategic planning. We try to be a partner with you in your organization to help you move forward and do it by making smart decisions, not growing too fast, making sure you can take on what you want to take on. Also, linking you with professionals. So if there are additional funds, working with investment people and helping partner with all of the other people who make your organization successful.
Awesome, awesome. Well, that doesn't sound like an easy day job sometimes. You do a lot. You're definitely overseeing a lot at one time for sure. Well, you're very much appreciated. I do know that and what you do.
Well, thank you.
And so, yeah, no problem, no problem. So, just out of curiosity, just more personal side note, what made you get into financing and banking before?
Well, I sort of fell into the role. I was graduating from college many years ago. I've been in banking for almost 30 years. But I did a lot of volunteer work when I was in college, and I had the opportunity to share some experiences at a local Kiwanis meeting. And there happened to be a banker there from a local institution that was also a community bank at the time. And they were were opening a new branch, and they were looking for some new employees. And I was fortunate enough that he reached out, and I went through the interview process, and that's where it started. So my history in banking has started in retail banking, where I was working the front line and then moved out through various roles until I moved into the commercial side, focusing on our deposit customers.
Awesome, awesome. Yeah, I know a lot of banking professionals that start basically you kind of start from the ground up, right? You start with the line banking, and so you kind of work your way up with that.
And it's really the best way to do it because you learn at every level what's expected of you. And it's a good way to grow into the profession.
I absolutely agree. Okay, so now we're going to get into some really interesting questions. Now, a few of these have been questions that my audience have asked me in the past,
Okay.
questions that I might have even had in the past. And so I think it would be really good for any small business. I know obviously Beyond the Shears is geared towards more pet grooming businesses and grooming owners.
Mhm.
But right now, this particular conversation is very unique because you are for any small business, as far as it can help with any small business company. So,
Correct.
so yeah, so absolutely tune in. So let's talk a little bit about the number one thing about banking and what makes it so important, and that's the relationship between a bank and the customer. Yes. And so, why is it important for small business owners to have a relationship with a community bank versus one of those big box banks that you see out there everywhere?
It's exactly what you said. At a community bank, we really have the ability to um, have a relationship with our customers, get to know who we're working with, understand your business. um, and help you grow appropriately for your business. Uh, I like to think that I give as much personalized service as I can, as do my coworkers, as well as other bankers and community banks across the area. Most of the time, you have local decision making. So, where my role focuses more on the deposit side and obviously the cash management, um, when you have borrowing needs, you usually have local decision makers. So, your loan isn't being reviewed by somebody in a different part of the state or a different part of the country, or maybe even a different country. Um, you have somebody who knows your community, knows the business, and understands the needs. Uh, we tend to be able to be a little bit more flexible. Um, and a lot of community banks are very stable. The relationships, going back to that, they're very meaningful. It's not a matter of checking a box and do you fit into a certain category. It's a matter of really building the relationship and getting to know people and growing with you as your business ages and moves forward.
Absolutely. And you said it very well that the community bank, the people that work there, they get to know you as the customer, as the client. And I, for one, obviously worked with you guys in the past, and we have a really good relationship. And you guys have helped me so much between the cash management side, you and the cash management, and then also the lending side. You guys have been absolutely wonderful with that. And one of the things that I did notice, yeah, exactly. One of the things that I noticed is when we were getting some certain loan structures done in the past, that the people of the community bank were like, oh, let me connect you with this person over here that's going to help with this thing, and let me connect you with this person over here that's going to help with that thing. And some of the things, like as a newer business owner, for the particular area I was going into, I didn't have a lot of experience, so I didn't know who to connect with. And so in fact, it was the bank that told me about certain permits that I needed that no one else told me about. It was the bank that did that. And so I'm like, wow, that's a really good service.
Wonderful. I'm glad to hear you had a good experience, but it's what we want to do. We want to make sure that we're helping in every way that we can, because your success directly affects our success. When you're a community bank, you want to be out there, you want to be present, you want to support the community, and having successful businesses is a key part of that.
Exactly. Now, I'm gonna keep you on a similar topic, but kind of changing it a little bit. In the world of small business, in accounting and tax specifically, we often encourage our clients to check in with us if they have questions, they receive notifications, or if they know of any potential tax changes that are coming up for their income for that tax year. It basically helps us keep us both in the know, right? So does banking take on a similar concept as that, as far as getting the clients to communicate with you?
Absolutely. We are always telling our customers, if you have questions, reach out to us. If we can answer right then, of course we will. If it takes a little bit of research, we're more than happy to dig in and see if we can find and help make those connections. Maybe we're not exactly the right people to help with the specific question, but certainly we work with so many different industries, and then we work with um, other professions that are needed to run a business. So we can help make connections with an accountant or with an attorney if it's needed, and all of those different things. So yeah, we want to be a resource that you trust and depend on in order to get your questions answered accurately.
Awesome, awesome. Now, there is one thing that you have shared with me in the past, is that with community banks, that you do service a very regional area. So you can't just take on, for example, if someone from another state calls you, I would like to talk with you. You only service a certain area. What area does community bank particularly service right now?
Community State Bank is located in southeastern Wisconsin, and we service Kenosha, Racine, and Walworth counties. That doesn't mean we're not opposed to somebody calling and asking a general banking question. We can certainly do that. But perhaps actually opening an account or providing lending services might be outside of our scope if it's not within the region that we service.
Okay. Yeah, so it might be good also to check with your maybe local chamber of commerce for all of the listeners out there for your local banks, because oftentimes those local banks are members of your local chamber. So if you are interested in getting a relationship with that, I would definitely probably start there first for sure.
Absolutely. I think that's a great
Yeah.
suggestion.
Yeah, awesome. Okay, so cash management. We all know that cash is king and we want to make more of it. We want to keep a lot of it, but sometimes that isn't always the case. But with you guys, we can actually make it a little bit easier. So, can you kind of briefly describe what is cash management and why does it matter for small business owners?
So cash management is just it's managing your incoming and outgoing your incoming receivables, your outgoing payments, and making sure that you're doing it efficiently and having your cash work for you the best way that you can. You want to make sure that you're aware of all of the different ways, and cash is king, like you said, but typically businesses don't pay unless you're a retail service. You might receive payment in cash, and you're certainly not paying your vendors in cash. Um, Writing checks is still a very popular way, but there's so many other ways to make your payments through electronic payments, sending EFTs or ACH transactions, using wire transfers, all of those things, credit cards, and understanding what goes along with those merchant services and the fees that are involved. Cash management also covers fraud, which is really an important part of today's world. You really have to keep a close eye on your account uh, and manage that fraud and work with your bank if they have fraud protection services to offer. Really understand those. Sometimes there are costs associated with them, but it's well worth the investment to protect your account balances.
Sure. And we'll get into that more here in a minute because I absolutely want to dive into that with you because it seems like it comes up more frequently every single day. I hear about it more and more. And I've actually, and I'll go into that story here in a minute, but I've actually been a victim of that with my one of my business accounts. And that was not fun. But unfortunately, it happens more often than we would like. But this is just from my basic understanding, because I've always sometimes get confused. EFT and ACH. Is there like a particular difference of those? I mean, I know they're two different things, but does it work similar, like the same way?
Actually, I always think of it as EFT. I always think of sort of the umbrella. EFT is electronic funds transfer. So that's movement of money electronically. ACH is the automated clearinghouse, and that is a way to move funds electronically. So under EFT, there's ACH transactions, and then like the wire transfers is another example of moving funds electronically. So EFT is just a broader term.
Gotcha. Okay. All right. Like you said, an umbrella term. Okay. Well, that makes more sense. Okay. So what tools or services does a community bank, maybe even yours or just a general community bank, typically offer that can help managing incoming and outgoing funds? Is that the ACH and the EFT? Do you offer other kind of like maybe online services that help with that?
Absolutely. So, obviously, I can talk best to the way our bank offers it, but ACH services you typically access through your online banking access. So, you'll log in and your bank will set you up so that you can send ACH files, it's what it's called. And so, the easiest way to describe ACH is to use the example of direct deposit. So anybody who has received a payroll check through direct deposit, that's using ACH services. So the sender has typically one debit from their account for the full amount of money that they're sending. And then they list all of the recipients who are going to be receiving the money. So if you're paying, for instance, 5 vendors each $1,000, as the sender, you would see one $5,000 debit from your account, and it would have corresponding $1,000 debits in each of those 5 individuals' banks. So,
Okay.
uh,
Yeah, makes sense. Okay. And then, so a lot of banks, obviously now we have the big box banks that have been around with online banking for a while. But what I love though are the smaller community banks are really getting up to speed with online banking now. And so of course we'll get into a little bit more about the specifics of that. But But as far as any kind of additional online banking, are there like certain levels of like protection? Because we're going to get into that here in a minute. Any certain levels of protection for like business accounts specifically that you would recommend?
Well, there's a couple different things you want to consider. Um, Obviously, the fraud protection, which you said we'll get into in a little bit. But when you have online banking, you want to be careful of how you're logging in and using the more services you use. If you're sending ACH transactions out, we didn't really talk about it, but if you have the ability to initiate wire transfers through online banking, if your computer was to get hacked or um, un, unfortunately, there's internal embezzlement. If somebody has access to your accounts, you want to safeguard yourself against that. So using a multi-factor authentication when you log in is important. Uh, Typically, banks require that when you have these additional services. If they give it to you as an option, use as many layers as you can to protect your accounts. Um, Also, if you have somebody else who helps you with your bookkeeping, if you're not the one managing your day-to-day account activities, typically those online services have layers of approval. So maybe you have your bookkeeper initiating these outgoing payments, and when they submit it, rather than the funds actually moving to the recipient, it is in a holding pattern until you log in and approve it. So use those two-step approval processes that are available
Awesome.
for you.
Yeah, that's a really, really great point you brought up because when I access any client account, one of the things that's part of my contractual paperwork, mostly for liability reasons for my firm, is that I have to get what's called accountant only access. So I have my own login, my own passwords, and I'm only allowed to access certain things. Mostly it's just going to be the statements and then check images so I can see just the data. That's all I can do. I can't transfer anything and I have no access to anything other than just visual. And really for most of the time, unless you have like a CFO actually in your firm or a accountant that's actually running in the firm itself, an external accountant doesn't need any more than that. That's all we really need. And so that way it protects both your business and then the accountants themselves as well.
The viewing access is really important. If you're just managing and, doing the type of work that you're doing, but if you have, if your business is actually, you have people within the business who are running those transactions for you, doing the separation of duties where you have one person initiating and a second person approving, that it's really beneficial.
It really is. Those internal controls definitely help to get those squared away. Absolutely. Okay, so let's talk more about some habits. So we all love habits. I need to set better ones. I do, I do know that. In terms of banking, what are some smart daily or weekly habits that a small business owner should have in place when it comes to managing their bank accounts?
Number one, which I think a lot of people are beginning to be like, I don't have time for this, but you need to review your accounts on a daily basis. Log into your account and take a look at it. And the reason I say that is the way the banking system works. Banks have 24 business hours to recall a transaction. So if something fraudulent has come out of your account or something unauthorized is being debited from your account, if you can notify your bank within that first 24 hours, they can get those funds back for you, um, and keep your account whole. After that, I can tell you our bank, and I'm sure most other banks out there will do everything that they can to help recover those funds, but it may not be possible. And unfortunately, it can be the account holder who takes that loss. Sometimes it is the bank, but many times it is the account holder. And you're responsible for what is going on in your account. And so you want to look at it every day. Now, I know there's in some cases where people say they really don't have time to do this. I would urge them to anyway. But a lot of times, some of the features through online banking, you have the ability to set up alerts. And so I always encourage the customers who I work with to turn on the alerts, and ours works in real time. So if you have a debit to your account, you can get a real-time text message that says, $300 was just debited from your account. And oftentimes that's just enough for you to go, oh yeah, that's that check I wrote, or oh yeah, that was that automatic loan payment that was coming out. But other times it could be, that is not something I recall doing, and I don't believe I authorized that. That can be enough for you to prompt you to log in and take a look at the account and then talk to the bank right away if it's not something that's valid.
Exactly. And you bring up another good point. Make sure you take the time to do this on a daily basis. And for me, I'm going to be a little tough on the audience here a little bit. Guys and gals, you have enough time to pull up your cell phone and look at your bank balances. you can you can absolutely do that. We are as a society, we are on our phones so much that we can easily just log into the bank and make sure everything looks kosher. Because I can't tell you how many times in the past I have actually had to do that, and that's before I found out about alerts, and fraud prevention and things like that. You guys have kind of set me up with a really nice system now, and so let's get into talking about that too. So let's just hit fraud prevention head on. So the reason I'm bringing this up wholeheartedly and so passionately is because this has happened to me. This happened to me not that long ago with a business checking account. Someone, stole a check and they printed a check and then they, ran through my accounts with these checks and stuff. So you guys were able to help me out of that sticky situation. And so one of the things that helped me was different types of systems you guys at Community Bank run. And so, but let's first start with some of the common types of fraud. Let's just kind of define what that is. What are some of the common types of fraud that small business owners should be aware of?
So there's a lot of different ways that people are collecting your account information. So different frauds to be aware of. I probably some of those that you already know. The email spoofs. You're getting an email. There's a link on there. It's encouraging you to click on. There's a sense of urgency to it. You think you have to do it right away. Those are all red flags. Imitating an email, make sure you're hovering over that email address to ensure that it's coming from the real email and not something that is off by one character or one dot, because that can make all of the difference in the world. One that's very popular with businesses is getting an email saying, we are now changing how we're collecting payments. Please send us ACH. Or you're sending them funds electronically, but now they're saying their account information has changed. We've changed banks or we have a new account number. When you get those messages, it's really important that you pick up the phone, use a trusted number, something that you have saved in your contacts, and call somebody at that company to verify that it is a legitimate email and that they are really changing their account information before you reply and update your information. Because you can be sending that money and then you're sending it, your vendor thinks they're not being paid and you think that you've sent money and now it's gone. So it's really important. Yeah, taking, what people might take over your computer, that happens at times. Holding it, I think this happens more with larger companies, holding your computer hostage and demanding a ransom. So, those are they're all out there. I will say that check fraud is still the number one type of fraud that's being perpetrated. So, if we combine this conversation, going back to the last question you had with some practices that account owners should do is when you're paying vendors, if you're paying them by check, you have every right to ask them, how do they negotiate their checks? Are they bringing them to the bank and depositing them there? Or are they taking a picture of them through mobile banking? Are they using a remote deposit scanner at their desk and, collecting payment that way? Because if they are, then you have some follow-up questions. What are they doing with your check once they've made the deposit? Are they storing it securely? Are they shredding it when they, dispose of it? They're not just throwing it in the garbage. Are they shredding it in a timely manner? You shouldn't be holding on to your check for more than 30 to 45 days. If they are, they're putting your account information at risk. Yeah. The other thing I want to share too is mail theft has been a really big issue. So when you're mailing out your checks, you need to make sure that you're mailing them in a secure way. Bring them to the post office, put them in the blue box, the blue U.S. postal mailboxes. Don't put them in your mailbox with the flag up. You're just advertising that you have important information in there. And people are, especially if you have businesses in industrial parks and business parks, they're just going around and collecting that mail. And now your account number, your account information is compromised. And from there, they can do a whole slew of things. They can wash your checks and make it payable to somebody different. They can adjust the dollar amount. They can use your account information to order new checks with your account information under a completely different name. There's lots of different ways that fraud can be perpetrated. And you want to take all of those proper steps to protect the account. And I think one of the things, Crystal, that you were leading to is the use of the fraud protection of positive pay. And that is so important in today's world. For those of you who aren't familiar with it, positive pay is a fraud protection service. And what it does is allows you to upload your account activity of outgoing funds prior to them hitting the bank. So every time you write a check or do, your accounts payable and you have a whole bunch of checks, you upload that information into the system through your online banking access. And you share the check number, the date, the dollar amount, and the payee. And then when those checks are negotiated and they're presented to the bank for payment, the system electronically matches all four of those items. And if everything matches, the check just processes seamlessly like normal. But if something doesn't match, the date is off, the payee doesn't match, then you're notified that there's an exception that needs to be reviewed. And then that's your clue to log in and take a look at it. Perhaps the electronic reading just misread something, but maybe it is something that's been altered or fraudulent, and it isn't a check that you've authorized. That gives you the opportunity to refuse payment on it and protect the balance of your account.
Yeah. Yeah, I use this, guys, just so you know, Laura has set me up with both of my business accounts because, like I said, we did have this happen into one of our businesses. It was mail fraud. They basically stole the check out of the mail. Yes, my flag was up on the mailbox, so she's absolutely right. That's just go ahead and take it to the post office directly. So that way you're not having to do that. But got a hold of my check, cashed it, basically did whatever they did with it. I guess they washed it and rewrote over it. And because everything was the same, my signature, everything was the same on it. And so they did that. And then, but now we have everything set up. And we have where every check I'll get notified if I don't have time, because honestly, I'm going to tell myself I don't put the checks in putting them in. I keep forgetting about that part. I don't write a whole lot of checks, so that's why. But you can set up rules. What I like about that, you can set up the rules. So like, certain payments that come through, it'll automatically, if you said, just go through seamlessly. And so if I'm paying my utility bill or my water bill or something, I could put in there like a max, it'll say, hey, do you want to set up a rule if it's just going to be a recurring payment? I say yes. And I can set in a maximum dollar amount that will come out for that. And then it goes through just fine. The first month or two might be a little bit more of a, hands-on. But after that, it's going just fine. It's really working well. And, it's kind of maybe catch a couple of things, not necessarily fraud, but some things that I forgot about. I'm like, oh yeah, that's coming out. So it also helps me with budgeting because I'm like, I forgot that was even coming out. So it actually helps me like make sure I put them in my books properly. So yeah, for sure.
Just so everybody, for clarification, those rules are set up for those electronic withdrawals. So I talked about positive pay in terms of check writing. But there is positive pay, as Crystal was explaining, for your electronic withdrawals. So those, like Crystal said, initially it's a little bit more because you're creating those rules up front. But once they're established, then you're good to go unless something comes through that you haven't established a rule for, or if it presents for a dollar amount outside of the parameters that you've authorized.
Now, let's talk a little bit about what a small business owner should do if they suspect fraud or any kind of unauthorized access. Like, what's maybe it's like the first couple of steps they need to take.
Notify your bank right away. So the first thing you want to do is notify the bank, have them go through the account with you. If you notice one transaction, you know, look at the account together, going back and see if there's any others that perhaps you have missed to make sure that you know everything that has come out of the account that hasn't been authorized. Um, and then some of the steps following that depends on how the fraud was perpetrated. How is the debit coming out of the account? If somebody got your account information because they hacked into your computer, well, then you're going to need to take your computer somewhere and have it scrubbed and make sure that everything is good with the computer. Um, you Some banks will ask you to open a new account and have a new account number. But if you're not using the fraud protection, I actually think adding the positive pay fraud protection to your existing account is a better protection for you going forward, especially if you don't know where the fraud is initiating from, which is often the case. If you don't know how somebody got your account information, if you close your current account and open a new one, your new account number is at risk because they can get it again. So having the positive pay, having the fraud protection on the account, it stops it right there. So you don't have to worry about that. I'd encourage you to file a police report as well. Sometimes these fraudsters are caught, but I will say oftentimes they are not. However, there's lots of cases that are pending, and it does help the police in their research link things. They can find commonalities and find out if it is, a group that is perpetrating all of these transactions.
Yeah, and it's definitely going to be more than one incident. Most of the time, these fraudsters are pros at this. This is what they do for their profession. And so it can cause a lot of damage. So for sure, absolutely. Laura, I think we're gonna go ahead and start wrapping some things up. So did you have anything else you would like to share? Are you complete?
I think we're good. You've asked some great questions, but certainly if you're looking for a bank, consider a community bank where the people who work in those banks, they're living in that community. Those relationships are important. They can really help you. But community banks, we want to be there to help and assist. And your success is a direct reflection of our success.
Mm, thank you so much. Appreciate that. Well, Laura, thank you so much for joining us today and sharing your expertise on cash management and the banking best practices for small business owners. Your insights are incredibly valuable, especially with those small business owners wearing all of those multiple hats that they always like to wear. And they may or may not realize how much they can get support in terms of their business with the smaller community banks. So thank you for emphasizing that for us. And as always, everyone, thank you so much for tuning into Beyond the Shears. Be sure to subscribe and leave us a review and share this episode with a business owner who could benefit from better banking practices. Until next time, keep learning, keep growing, and keep creating magic in your business. See you soon.